significant development that we're putting into perspective tonight. Tech giant Nvidia becomes the first ever company, in fact, to hit the 4 trillion market cap. The stock is soaring away in trade on the back of this, and the chip maker, remember, benefited heavily from the AI boom. And also remember that it crossed the 3 trillion market cap in June last year. Taking all of that across to my guest this evening, Jasprit Bindra, co-founder AI and Beyond. Jasprit, thank you very much for taking the time out, joining us here this evening on ET Now on India Tonight. Let's begin with the fact that how do you really interpret the speed of Nvidia's ascent? You know, looking at those numbers from 2 trillion in Feb 2024, 3 trillion in June 2024, and now 4 trillion. And while you, of course, speak about that, in your opinion, what factors have really driven this meteoric rise for them?
Well, it is the fastest growing large company in history. There's no question of that. But I think the 4 trillion mark was anticipated. In fact, about a week back, I had written about the fact that it will happen this month. But I think even they surprised me by it happening this week. I think the factors behind it are threefold. Just before that, the only company which came close to 4 trillion was Apple, and that was around 3.91 trillion around COVID time, but then it withdrew. Three factors behind that. Number one, the fact that all the big tech majors have not let up, but in fact have accelerated their spend on AI. So that's factor number one. Factor number two is that whenever they spend on AI, the maximum spend goes to Nvidia, which has an almost monopoly 80% market share of the chips which power AI. And number three, and most important probably, is the thaw which has happened between the US and China, therefore making it possible for Nvidia to sell underpowered chips to China also, which is about 20% of its revenue. So I think all these three things combined made it reach 4 trillion, and who knows, maybe 5 trillion in another 6 months or so.
Well, that will give us another opportunity to perhaps connect when that happens. But Jasprit, as you pointed out, right, you said you anticipated it, given the aspect that, of course, it surprised you with the fact that it happened sooner. But that also talks about where we're headed in terms of this industry as well. Given the fact that the but obvious situation is, are we heading towards an AI-centered bubble?
I don't know whether that's a bubble. I think what we will see are little micro bubbles than a big, huge bubble like the dot-com bubble that was there and which collapsed. So by micro bubbles, I mean, I think there will be hype and then there will be deflation because of that hype. A small bubble burst will happen and, valuations will go down, but not markedly. They'll go down a little bit and then they'll go up again. Another micro bubble will happen. And actually, these micro bubbles have been happening. If you see that over the past 6-9 months, I mean, Nvidia was almost 20, 30, 25%, even more than 25% lesser than its valuation today. Given the fundamental nature of the AI technology and the fact that it's not just the big techs, but now traditional companies and even countries are spending behind AI. And finally, the next evolution of AI beyond generative AI to agentic AI and then to robotic or physical AI, I think there's a lot of runway left for companies like Nvidia to capitalize on this whole AI boom.
Absolutely, and perhaps we don't know what else is to come. But having said that, we'll also take a quick check of the market. Jasprit, as we speak about this, we're given to understand there's a 2% uptick after what we're looking at in terms of the history that's been created. We're just going to put that on our screens as well, just in case we have those details. But while we speak about that, Jasprit, the other aspect over here is the tariff impact on chip makers. How do you look at that aspect as well?
I think the market used to be very scared about tariffs when Trump started talking about tariffs. But if you look at the latest tariffs, in fact, the markets in the US and other places have actually gone up because now the markets are discounting what Trump says about tariffs because there's been so much of, of putting a tariff and then withdrawing, putting a tariff and then withdrawing, so much of crying wolf in a sense that the markets have just don't seem to be bothered about that as much. Also, I don't think that these tariffs are going to affect AI and AI chips as much. They definitely are affecting a lot of goods produced in Southeast Asian countries which are coming into the US, and a lot of other such goods produced in China. But I think in the high tech field, with the US wanting to keep its lead, I suspect that they'll treat the high tech industry with much more caution than they have with others. And so I really don't see too much of an impact of tariffs on Nvidia.
All right, so the tariff saga continues, and you're absolutely right. Most of them going on to discount what he said. But the other aspect, taking a cue from what you did mention, was about Apple, right? And also, given the of Nvidia's dominance today, is that comparable, in your opinion, to Microsoft perhaps in the 90s or Apple post 2007, or is this, in your opinion, a different level of systemic tech that we're looking at?
I think more the latter. I think it's a different level of systemic tech that we are looking at. Microsoft was a software dominance, and many times when you're dominating or building software, it's much easier for competition to come in, like Google came in. Apple was a little different. It was hardware dominance, and both hardware and software, in a sense, dominance. So it was different from Microsoft, and therefore it kind of kept its dominance for a longer time. Nvidia's dominance is of a third category. It's pure hardware, very difficult. It's pure hardware along with a big moat that they have called CUDA, which is their software, which is basically now become the de facto standard. Think of it as the Windows for AI chips. And so that dominance of that software, as well as the chips, which while everyone else is trying, they can't seem to get anywhere close to the performance that Nvidia has, I think definitely signals a different kind of dominance. The other thing I would say about Nvidia, as opposed to Apple and Microsoft, is that Nvidia is very founder driven. It's still a founder mode company, as they say. And Jensen Huang always is paranoid, always believes his company is a big startup. And therefore, just the way it's run, just the way capital markets, the speed it works is very different from non-founder corporate-driven companies. That sets it apart. The culture sets it apart.
That's a very interesting point to make. Perhaps it's good to ask, what lessons can investors also learn from this kind of a journey to the top of the company?
Well, I think we had this phrase coming in called founder mode 6 months back or so, when every company was saying we need to get back to founder mode. In fact, what's happened at Google is interesting because they were seen to be lagging in AI. Sergey Brin has come in and pretty much on a day-to-day basis is now back in Google and is leading all their AI efforts, while Sundar Pichai focuses on the business, focuses on regulation, etc. And you see the difference happening in Google in the last couple of months, where they've suddenly regained a lot of ground that they had lost in AI. So I think this is a lesson that even at these very large companies, before they become very bureaucratized, ossified, it's always good to have a founder or a founder-like CEO. I also do believe that in Microsoft, while Satya Nadella is not the founder, one of the reasons Microsoft has been doing so well, acting at speed, is that Nadella actually acts like a founder, even if he isn't. That wasn't necessarily true of some of the other companies, but I think this is the trend that we are seeing, that an engineer, a tech savvy founder kind of a CEO, even at big tech companies, makes a difference. The other example, obviously, is Elon Musk. When he goes away from his companies, the companies go down. When he comes back, the companies go up back again.
All right, so perhaps that's a cue to take from. And more interestingly, will we see that sort of a strategy come back to the industry? We'll have to wait and watch. But Jasprit, thank you very much for joining us with your insights as to how you're looking at this. And like I said, perhaps when it does hit 5 trillion, we'll have another chat about it. Have a